Well. Good evening, Soul Butterflies. I trust you're having a wonderful Wednesday evening. You are listening to Soma Fusion Radio with your host, Katie Kamara, coming to you live from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We are broadcasting to you live this fine evening on Facebook, soma-fusion.com, YouTube, and the official Global Enlightenment Radio Network.com website. For those who do not know who I am or what I do outside this radio show, to which many have referred to me as their guardian angel and their inspiration for their dreams, I am an international author, life coach practitioner specializing in interpersonal relationships, executive life coaching, a multidisciplinary in psychology and alternative therapies, and I'm the founder of Soma Fusion, Mind, Body, and Soul, and the Soma Fusion Academy. Much to discuss on Soma Fusion Radio tonight. I hope you all have your pens and paper handy, because if you don't, you can just catch the archive after this show later. The official advertisers of Soma Fusion Radio are Conscious Apparel Co. Conscious Apparel Co. has stepped in the forefront of expanding consciousness through fashion, whether it's mantra tees, platonic solid hoodies, or conscious baby onesies. Conscious Apparel Co. provides itself in providing aesthetic apparel that performs the role of elevating consciousness and spreading love. You can find those guys at consciousapparelco.com. I have a promo code for you. We are one, all one word, for 20% off of all of their apparel. The next one is Santosha Co. Santosha Co. is a fresh new skincare company that specializes in natural and organic skincare products. The majority of the ingredients that go into their products are handpicked from their farm in northern Wisconsin. You can find those guys at santoshaco.com. Go to their website for 10% off currently for their beautiful natural skincare products. FNX Fitness is located in North Salt Lake, Utah. They are committed to creating innovative supplements of the highest quality that provide focus for a productive morning, energy to thrive all day, performance supplements to reach new goals, unique sleep and recovery formulas to support any sport, and healthy supplements to support an active lifestyle for years to come. You can go to those guys at fnxfit.com. I have a promo code for you this evening, as promised last week, COLLAB, COLLAB, all one word, for 25% off of all of their FNX Fits products. If you support me and my work, you can make a donation via PayPal at Patreon, and you can go find that is patreon.com/Soma Fusion. Shout out to my dear friends at PSN Radio Network, Andrew Espino from Miami, Florida, World Pirate Radio Network, Jeffrey Ryder at Seoul, South Korea, and Vincent Eastwood, the host of the Vinnie Eastwood Show, New Zealand's #1 talk radio show, and SoFlo Radio. And I'd like to make an honorable mention to the late Jorge Rodriguez, who passed this year on the 3rd of July. SoFlo Radio was the #1 online radio network in South Florida. I encourage you to come and join my challenges in the Soma Fusion Academy, Enrich Your Mind and Grow Together, with the full support of other members of the Soma Fusion Academy by actively engaging with myself and others. Be reminded that you're not alone in your journey of personal development and enrichment of your lives. We currently have 3 challenges scheduled for this, and full 12-week intensive courses to come. The first one is the 21-day mindfulness challenge, the 30 challenges in 30 days, and the intimacy challenge. All 3 are going right now. Go to soma-fusion.com website, where you can have access to daily updates, courses, exclusive daily challenges, exclusive weekly motivational messages, academy resources, Soma Fusion community forum, and additional coaching and therapy services provided by me. For more information on the Soma Fusion Academy, again, go to somafusion.com and download the app, or you can just email me with your queries at the Soma Fusion Academy at gmail.com. I would like to mention to you that I've officially gone back to school for the enhancement of my own education to do a double PhD in metaphysics and alternative integrative medicine. Starting next month, August, I will be co-lecturing whilst doing hands-on training. So I got a busy month coming up. I would like to also mention that I am a co-host of another radio show, Goddesses and Devils, with myself and Amanda McManus. We will be speaking on various topics that are very taboo in nature, from life, relationships, spirituality, empowerment, and everything taboo, inclusive of sex. So don't miss that show. It starts at 7 p.m. Eastern every Saturday. And for new listeners who have never listened to my show, Somafusion Radio, it comes as no surprise. I am a radio show host that likes to raise awareness and educate to empower others to reach individual potential, mind, body, and soul. And I also have my own personal studies, which I explore each and every week, from religion, theology, sociology, occult studies, ancient history, civilizations, ancient philosophy, you name it, we've got it. So we will be talking about something different each and every week. And feel free to reach out to me at somafusionmedia@gmail.com with your topics of interest that you would love me to talk about. But one thing I do love is to delve into hard topics, especially those that are extremely taboo and critically controversial or extremely academic. To those who are involved in their own beliefs, I explore them with critical, open thinking and express them without judgment and social inclusion of all. One thing I'll never do is push on my show is push for you to exclusively jump on my boat of values, beliefs, or ideologies, but share them with you as a process of diverse learning as a unified, harmonious community. With that said, I encourage each and every one of you listeners out there who are listening to call in and join our conversation. And please be reminded of this. You do not have to believe everything I say on this show, nor do you have to believe the guests. But the most important thing for you to do is to research and learn for yourself with an open, curious mind. So tonight we'll be talking about DNA origins and human hybridization with Geraldine Orozco. We will welcome in callers, and I'll have that number flashed up on the live screen if you are watching the video on Facebook Live or on YouTube. But for most of our evolutionary history, for most of the time, anatomically, modern humans have been on Earth. We've shared the planet with other species of humans. And it's only been in the last 30,000 years, the mere blink of an evolutionary eye, that modern humans have occupied the planet as the sole representative of the hominin lineage. But we carry evidence of these other species within us. Lurking within our genome are traces of genetic material from a variety of ancient humans that no longer exist. And these traces reveal a long history of intermingling as our direct ancestors encountered and mated with archaic humans. As we use increasingly complex technologies to study these genetic connections, we are learning not only about these extinct humans, but we are also about the larger picture of how we evolved as a species. Our distant ancestors interbred with the Neanderthals and other Homo species. These hybridization events may have been crucial to our evolution. Now, if your ancestors hail from anywhere outside of Africa, it's a safe bet that you are part Neanderthal. After modern humans first left Africa, they came in contact with Neanderthals and things got cozy. These early frolics are now visible in our DNA. Genetic analysis indicates that Europeans and Asians obtained 1 to 4% of their DNA from Neanderthals. Now, it seems that everyone was at it. Neanderthals interbred with other species, the Denisovans, as did some of us. Some people from Southeast Asia have up to 6% Denisovan in DNA. Even Africans whose ancestors never left the continent carry some Neanderthal DNA, because 3,000 years ago, people from Europe and Asia migrated to Africa. Many modern Africans have inherited some genes, including some Neanderthal ones from these people. Now, some scientists are going even further, that they propose that our entire species is a product of hybridization between species, and that we owe much of our success to this very fact. You might not like the idea, in which case it's worth bearing in mind that hybridization is common in nature. There is one problem with that idea, that hybridization has been a crucial for our evolution, and we do not have evidence of any interbreeding between species before modern humans left Africa. There is one, that means that modern humans are known to be hybrids, but not all. Furthermore, known hybridization events all happened relatively recently, when our species had already evolved to be more or less the way it is today. There is a simple reason why we do not have hard evidence of ancient interbreeding in Africa. We have not yet been able to analyze any DNA that is ancient. However, some researchers believe that it did happen. In 2011 study found that some group of Africans carried genetic material from an archaic population that split from the ancestors of modern humans. The results are hard to explain without hybridization. But there are many species of early human-like creatures often living alongside of each other, one of which eventually gave rise to us. We don't know who or when, but it seems reasonable to expect that these long-lost species had the occasional romp, and we owe it to our cultural success to these ancient meetings. Of all of the many human species that are evolved, only ours has survived to the present day. Our complex culture has clearly been a big part of our ability to outcomplete the other species. Mixing with other species could have helped us develop that culture. And when our ancestors met other species, they may have shared knowledge as well as genes. And learning new habits and tricks from other species could have helped spur on our development. And the things that we think of as creativity could be the result of an interaction between different groups. And we had clearly evolved to be good at copying, learning, and innovation. And these traits that primed us to become the cultural beings that we are today. Now, not everyone is convinced that hybridization has played a key role in this process. And we have produced many of our greatest innovations over the past 10,000 years. Throughout that period, we were the only human species around, obviously. This implies that innovations emerged in human history for reasons other than from hybridization. We have very little in the way of the theory, but how human cultural interactions, institutions may evolve, and the answer may come from genetics. And one day, possibly within a few years, we might be able to see a sequence DNA from much older human specimens. Only it become just how clear how much hybridization has shaped who we are. But what about if a gene from an insect insinuated itself straight into your DNA? What if more than 100 genes from bacteria did? Wouldn't that make you some kind of Frankie human? No, it would actually make you exactly what you are today. And it turns out that genes are quite capable of hopping around from one organism to another, completely different species. Not only do these genes jump, but when they land in a new host, they can actively change it. And this can give the new host species new abilities, sending it down an evolutionary path. Even humans may host to alien genes, and it seems that they have shaped our evolution. But genes have to keep copying themselves into new hosts, or they will be destroyed. And when their current host dies, their usual route is to pass straight down through the generations. When you have children, you pass on to some of your genes onto them, and those genes find a new host. And sometimes genes get altered along the way, and these changes, known as mutations, help ensure the offspring are different to their parents. And over many generations, enough mutations can build up and create a whole new species. And in the long run, all the diversity of the natural world. On The Origin of Species, Charles Darwin laid out this process of evolution, of how evolution works. He drew a sketch of a branching tree where each new tree was a new species born of accumulated mutations. This is what biologists call the tree of life. But there's another way for genes to find a new host, and sometimes it can jump directly from one organism to another organism, which might belong to a completely different species, and this process is called horizontal gene transfer. That means that Darwin's image of the tree of life isn't quite right. If genes can hop between organisms that are on different branches of genes, we have to draw lines linking those separate branches. And as a result, the tree becomes a convoluted network of branches and twigs all knotted together. The degree of horizontal gene transfer we're finding means that the tree of life looks a bit like a strangling fig. With that said, these gene transfers are very rare, and that's because any gene trying to move into another organism faces a lot of barriers. In 2015, Crisp and his colleagues found that there are 145 alien genes nestling in the human genome. They seem to have arrived relatively recently from plants, animals, fungi, bacteria. But this horizontal gene transfer is being detected more and more, and it's been an important part of evolution of different species across the whole planet, including ourselves. Genes Chris found aren't only just along for the ride, they are active. These genes are from other organisms are making proteins which are useful to us. That's why these genes can persist. In the first few days of your life, you have been churning out copies of one of the newest viruses to integrate into our genome. The HERV-K virus infected humans about 200,000 years ago, around the time of the origin of our species. However, it's been infecting primates long before and made its way into our ancestors many times. And some of the genes involved are determining our blood type, while others determine our metabolism. But there are others performing more intimate jobs. Not everyone has it, but those who do seems to play a nice little role in the early development of the embryo. They found the HERV-K genes were turned on for a short time after the egg was fertilized. But before the embryo implants into the wall of a mother's womb, it's not clear what viral genes are doing. But one idea is that they protect the embryo from other viruses. And we're being infected all the time by the HERV-K could be protecting the embryo from other infections from viruses expressed in other cells or new viral infections. Viral genes also seem to be more crucial in the next stage of pregnancy. Everything from viruses to insects has given us genes, and those genes have changed our way our bodies work and helped us evolve. Even our most distant cousins have been involved in the evolution of our species. And horizontal gene transfer tells us that our relationships with other life forms on Earth are much closer than we thought. However, different from us an organism may be, it seems that their genes can be often remarkably useful to us. And we're only just starting to discover how many alien genes we have and what they are doing for us. Now, that is on Earth. But do we share DNA with extraterrestrial? If there's life beyond Earth, the genetic code might be our common code or bond. The primary difficulty for interstellar communication is finding common ground between ourselves and other intelligent entities, about which we can know nothing with absolute certainty. This common ground would be the basis for a universal language that could be understood by any intelligence, whether the Milky Way, the Andromeda, or beyond the cosmic horizon. To the best of our knowledge, the laws of physics are the same throughout the universe, which suggests that the facts of science may serve as a basis for mutual understanding between humans and extraterrestrial intelligence. One key set of scientific facts present an intriguing question. If aliens were to visit Earth and learn about its inhabitants, would they be surprised that such a wide variety of species all share a common genetic code? Or would this be all too familiar? There is one probable cause to assume that the structure of genetic material is the same throughout the universe, and that while this is liable to give rise to life forms not found on Earth, the variety of species is fundamentally limited by the constraints built to the genetic mechanism. On Earth, we have only sequenced the genomes of a small percentage of living organisms and have only recently completed the human genome. We have successfully cloned several animals, but technical and ethical roadblocks prevent scientists from doing the same with humans. If extraterrestrial civilization isn't burdened with ethical dilemmas about cloning, however, sending the genetic code for humans and other species may be the most effective way to teach them about our biology. References to our genetic makeup may have been a feature in the interstellar messages from the very beginning. Although the first genes wouldn't be sequenced for another 3 years, in 1974, the Arecibo message, an interstellar radio message sent from the Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico, included a rudimentary bitmap of DNA's helical structure, designed by Frank Drake, the founder of SETI, with input from Carl Sagan. A receiver message consisted of 1,679 binary digits rearranged as a rectangular bitmap. The resulting image depicts the number 1 through to 10 and the atomic numbers for the 5 elements that make up DNA, as well as the formulas for sugar and bases and DNA and nucleotides, a crude drawing of a human, and graphic representation of a solar system and a picture of the receiver telescope. Would aliens be surprised that life on Earth shared by an underlying genetic code, or would this be too familiar? Let's get back to that question. In 1999, 2 interstellar radio transmissions known as cosmic calls included symbols for each of our DNA's 4 nucleotides. To date, however, only a single interstellar transmission has encoded any genetic information. In some ways, it would be most disturbing to make contact with an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization populated by fleshy, mostly hairless hominids than a civilization with 8-eyed cephalopods. But this possibility is not entirely out of the question. As astrobiologist Charles Cockle has argued, empirical evidence suggests that certain features of life are deterministically driven by physical laws. Extrapolating from this, it is reasonable to believe that at all levels of structural hierarchy, alien life is likely to look strangely familiar to the life we know on Earth. And it would be naive, of course, to suggest that evolution is totally determined by the laws of physics, given the significant and obvious role that chance plays in the trajectory of evolution. For example, research suggests that the probability of an asteroid impact resulting in global cooling, mass extinction, and subsequent appearance of mammals was quite low, 66 million years ago. It was a sheer cosmic bad luck that an asteroid impacted the relatively small portion of Earth's surface that was rich in hydrocarbons and sulfur and ultimately choked the Earth with stratospheric soot and sulfate aerosols. In this case, the site of the asteroid impact changed the history of life on Earth in a way that could never be predicted by deterministic evolutionary laws. The point is that although the trajectory of evolution isn't predictable in advance, the variety of species it produces is not boundless. This contradicts the intuitive interpretation of the Darwinian evolution which suggests that natural selection results in a tendency of species to form varieties in an infinite number. But it may sound far-fetched at first, but arguably no more than creationism or evolution. Some researchers like Zecharia Sitchin believe extraterrestrials genetically engineered humans to work as slaves. Others, like David Icke, hypothesize that extraterrestrials are given more diabolical and have manipulated human consciousness to control the entire world. But what about reptilians? Former sports broadcaster turned researcher David Icke conducted an extensive research on the role extraterrestrials play in human engineering. Icke adamantly claims that extraterrestrial species known as the reptilians control our world. These menacing creatures allegedly have the power to shapeshift and take human form and assume forms of political leaders to maintain global control. Reptilian-like figures are prominent in many ancient texts: the serpent in Genesis, the Garden of Eden, the half-bird, half-snake Mesoamerican god Quetzalcoatl. I can't pronounce that word, but there you go. And Greek mythology's Medusa are all great examples. This recurring theme of godlike reptilians could potentially indicate these creatures have been on Earth throughout human existence and maybe perhaps played a role in creating us in the first place. But other theories explore other ideas that extraterrestrials manipulated our DNA to create a mixed bloodline on our planet. The most notable piece of evidence to support this theory is something called the Rh factor. The presence of Rh factor in human blood makes the blood type positive, while its absence makes it negative. Most people are Rh positive, and only 50% of the population does not have the Rh factor. The Rh factor can be contributed to other species, more specifically primates. The absence of it continues to remain a mystery. However, some believe it stems from extraterrestrials. Most alien abductees are Rh negative. But is this a coincidence? We'll find out. The missing link, though, is a popular term we've all heard at one point or another. It's an informal term used to describe the transitional species or a species that connects two together, such as apes and humans. Greg Braden has explored missing links in human genetic modification in depth. He publicizes the fact that human DNA shows unmistakable signs of planning that evolution alone cannot explain. In addition, he points to the fact that, according to the fossil record, modern, highly intelligent humans seem to appear almost overnight, about 200,000 years ago. But how did we progress so quickly to primitive apes and highly advanced beings? Is it possible that another species deliberately manipulated our genetic code? And we can go on and on and on and on and on about how some aforementioned theories may be a little uncanny, but there's plenty of evidence that suggests that extraterrestrials indeed influence mankind. Ancient artworks, written texts like Popol Vuh, and ancient artifacts depict all reference to otherworldly beings. Perhaps their impact is even more powerful. Perhaps we modern humans are a product of extraterrestrial engineering. As genetic engineering continues to evolve and change over time, one can't help but wonder if this is new technology or history repeating itself. We've completed enormous feats throughout the years, from discovering DNA to sequencing the human genome, to cloning animals, and even genetically modifying human embryos. This incredible power and progression inevitably raises ethical questions and concerns over whether or not we are playing God. But could we also be playing alien? It will be interesting, to say the least, to see where genetic engineering takes us. And maybe you've never heard of any space aliens, but recent polls indicate that up to 14% of Americans, and I may be wrong on that stat, but claim to have been abducted by them. The experience does not sound pleasant. The extraterrestrials are often said to take their captives into their saucers, lay them out on a table, and extract sperm from the men, and impregnate the women. And if you're familiar with UFO lore, you know that there are a couple of common explanations for these breeding experiments. One is that the aliens are in a reproductive bind in their homeworld. They can no longer successfully procreate, so they've come to Earth to use humans as incubators to spawn alien offspring. The other is that aliens are producing hybrid beings that will somehow help them take over our planet. Scientists, of course, are dubious of such claims. After all, there's never really been any good evidence that abductions are taking place. That's in the scientific world. But it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. No one ever seems to bring along a cell phone to take photos or to pocket an artifact from the sources. There are other avenues for this to happen. The extraterrestrials are producing hybrids that can better withstand the rigors of a toastier planet. By producing a new model of Homo sapiens, this project would eliminate the need for difficult climate accords or elaborate geoengineering projects. It would also help the aliens themselves, who are said to be living among us, by preserving a part of their DNA that's carried by the temperature-tolerant hybrids. But let me guess. Let me tell you about this, the Hybridization program, a documentary starring our guest tonight. And if you think that what I've said is so far out there, you need to check that documentary out. And I was just going to read what the documentary is about. Abductions, reproduction experiments, memories of seeing children off planet. The idea that humans participating in alien hybrid programs sounds absurd until you talk to people who have experienced it. Thousands of women and men around the world have reproductive experiments carried out against their will. The most harrowing, unexplained pregnancies that terminate without explanation. In many cases, the memories of what happens remain suppressed and fragmented, leaving experiences confused, depressed, and with a profound sense of loss. In others, the memories are visceral and emotionally disturbing. But thanks to increased public acceptance and regression therapy, more and more people are coming forward with stories of abductions and strange fertilization procedures that occur during their frightening experiences. Are aliens involved in a complex hybridization project where human females are used as vessels to carry hybrid fetuses, and human males have their sperm harvested until they're ready to be transferred elsewhere? And if so, to what end? The documentary Extraordinary, The Seeding is a riveting documentary that tells these stories through a one-on-one interviews with abductees, brave individuals willing to share intensely personal and emotional stories with the rest of the world. Through analysis with global ufology experts, the film also explores hybridization and why it's happening and what the impact on humanity is and will be. And the information is presented and intended to educate, entertain, and encourage audience to ask one simple question: what if this was all true? And for that, we'll have to seek the experiences and research of our guests to find out. And so with that said, let's hit a break. You are listening to Somafusion Radio with your host, Katie Kamara, on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. For more information, please look me up on Somafusion Media, or on somafusionmedia.com, or soma-fusion.com, or up on social media. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share out this show, and let the whole world know what we're learning each week, and invite them to listen with us. And when we come back, we will talk some more about DNA origins and human hybridization with Geraldine Orozco. And we are back. You are listening to Somafusion Radio with your host, Katie Kamara, on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. And tonight we have our guest, Geraldine Orozco. Now, she has been featured on many TV shows from Coast to Coast AM many times. Geraldine Orozco researches the role of DNA as the accuracy of the past, present, and future, with consciousness as the catalyst. A life-changing contact experience in 2013 resulted in the activation of psychic abilities, and in 2017, she underwent several hypnotic regressions with vetted therapists. Regressions uncovered a lifelong history of abduction and participation in the human hybridization project, human hybridization, with 24 hybrid children as a result. Her life is dedicated to the dissemination of knowledge of hybridization programs and the correction of commonly held dogma of the human genetic timeline, historical record, and human structure. Geraldine is the owner of Bay Area Meditation in San Francisco, California, which specializes in corporate wellness programs for Silicon Valley tech giants, including Google, Facebook, Instagram, Square, biorobotics, and more. She facilitates DNA reprogramming sessions and retreats internationally. She's a speaker, radio show host, and is currently writing her book, DNA Origins and the Hybridization program. Why am I saying program? I don't know. But I do welcome you on, Geraldine. How are you this evening? Hold on. You have to unmute. Yes, we can't hear you.
That's a good idea, isn't it? All right. Well, Katie, thank you so much for having me on this show. It is such an honor to be here. And I have to say that your intro and preparation to the topic is excellent. So thank you so much for that. And I'm excited to get started and start talking about this stuff.
Absolutely. And there was a reason why, because I know that there's a lot of people very, very unfamiliar with this topic. They hear about human cloning and biotechnologies that are happening currently right now, but they get a little strange and funny when they talk about ufology and alien species and the grays. It's not as if it's not unheard of. It's that it's just too hard to believe.
Understandably, and trust me, before it happened to me in 2013, I had nothing to do with this field. I just, even the interest in astronomy or any kind of topic, what we may think is a fringe topic like ET contact, UFOs, none of that was in my, in my mind at that time. And so when someone truly experiences something so life-shattering, paradigm-shifting like this, it really changes the way you look at reality. And then it took me several times myself of having to really integrate and process what I had gone through in order for myself to accept, what was actually happening. So, it's something that when you hear it from an experiencer, and this is why it's so important to hear experiencers' stories. When you experience firsthand having that contact, and not just that, but your entire life and how you see the world, and even the psychic abilities that came as a result of that experience. I mean, my entire life changed. I sold my business. I had to change my entire career because it no longer made sense to me. So it's an important topic to discuss.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, how did you get into all of this? How did your journey begin?
Yeah, so basically, I started a business in event planning in 2008, 2009. And, I had been working for that. I was an entrepreneur. I was working in several different kinds of little businesses, trying to see what would work best. But I've had a lot of up and downs. Those of you that are entrepreneurs know what a roller coaster it is, emotional roller coaster to have your own business. So I experienced a lot of very difficult situations, but one of the most impactful things was the passing away of my partner at the time, and it really shook up my reality, and that really took me into diving deep into trying to understand pain and suffering. And so I became certified in meditation, holistic stress management, and I basically began to notice that the focus of my success was beginning to change as I started to apply mindfulness into my routine and meditation. So it was an incredible shift in the money I was making, how I felt about my emotions, being able to process grief, and so on and so forth. So I became very interested in the field of healing, holistic healing, and mindfulness. And so I also decided to become certified in quantum energy healing and pranic energy healing. Which afforded me kind of a new look at how, consciousness plays a role, or intention, the power of intention in healing and creation. But that was just the beginning. I mean, I started to want to ask more questions, and I started to meditate. And after meditating with, working with shamans, one in particular here in the San Francisco Bay Area who really changed my life, taught me a lot about how to understand my own emotions and my perceptions. I decided to take it deeper, and I funded Bay Area Meditation, which is a corporate meditation program, which makes all of these meditation and mindfulness concepts more accessible and more applicable, for the average person that may not necessarily have access to that information. So I work with, as you mentioned in the bio, Google, Square, all these companies that are looking to incorporate. They understand the importance of mindfulness. So through this journey, I began to question a lot of things, because those of you that meditate a long time know that when you start undoing those layers, of meditation, you begin to surface a lot of stuff. And I started to realize that I had a lot of stuff from childhood and a lot of other little things that were beginning to surface. And it was through that experience that I think I started to deprogram aspects of myself. I stopped watching television, I stopped hearing music, and I dedicated myself to meditation. So one night in 2013, I had the most incredible experience. Even though I had my business and I had been very busy throughout that week, and as normal, managing the businesses, I went to bed, and all of a sudden my phone, well, actually I wake up because there's a bright light in the room, and I look at my phone and the time is 3:33 in the morning. So, that was the first time I experienced numbers like that, sequential numbers like that. Some people say they see it all the time. I after waiting a little while, I realized the light wasn't going away. So I get out of bed and I walk over to the window to look and see if somebody had been trying to get in the house, or I don't know. I just became concerned, because the light was so powerful. It was a white light. So I go over to the window and I look out, and as I'm looking out, I'm faced with the light that is so bright that literally it's burning my eyes. My eyes are watering. I'm squinting. I'm trying to look and see what kind of car or truck or some kind of vehicle could be in our very private suburban neighborhood, shining such a light at 3 in the morning. And of course, the next thing I know, my entire body paralyzes. I can't move. My eyeballs are able to move, and I'm horrified, and I'm being pulled out of my window before these beings, these 6 grays, very tall grays. And as I'm seeing them, they're coming closer to me. It's just, for an average person, you just cannot put it into your reality that you're experiencing something. And this is something that's occurring physical. You're not sleeping, you're not dreaming, you're not in a meditative trance, you're wide awake, So as I'm being brought into this craft, I'm being introduced to all kinds of information. I see my aunt on the craft, who is also in her pajamas. We're all in our nightgowns, and she's unconscious, not aware of seeing me. So, it was just terribly impactful. And that's when I was introduced to my hybrid children, and it was the beginning of life-changing journey for me.
How does one become a hybrid child? Like, because I know that you're a hybrid mother, but how is that possible?
Yeah, right. And at that moment when I saw the children, you don't those questions. It's such a shocking moment to see the child, and more than just see a child that really it looks like you, even though they don't look that human. You can see yourself in them. There's telepathic communication, and there's an exchange of information that, it would be hard to explain, because it's almost as if you are being inserted thoughts and explanations or images. As soon as I saw the child, I started to get flashbacks of holding that child in past experiences, being brought on the craft, being on the tables, the infamous tables where you feel that you're being worked on somehow, or some procedures are being done to you. And in my mind, those memories had never surfaced, so I was confused as to where they were coming from. So the child that's there in front of me is basically acknowledging me as their mother, and I become so immediately, your maternal instincts kick in, and you want to protect the child. You don't know if you should ask the child to come with you. It's a very confusing experience, because you're trying to merge our reality and what we know you can do or can't do when you see a child, with something that's interdimensional. So there's quite a bit of a trauma that occurs as a result of these experiences. So what happened is, the next day I became completely sensitive to the electromagnetic field. I woke up at the edge of my bed upside down. And you know, the next Monday when I went back to work, I had that sensitivity to the electromagnetic field. And so it took me months to be able to go back out, go shopping normally, and go to the mall because I was so sensitive to everything around me. So we fast forward to 2017. I had been trying to research this hybridization concept. And at that time, I didn't even know the word hybridization because I didn't know what to Google. You know, I even thought about calling the police at that moment because, you know, who do you ask justice? Who do you ask for help when you're shown a child and then you're taken away from them? I mean, your entire reality must come into question. You know, any responsible adult would want to question that experience. So trying to integrate that into my life was difficult until I decided to research about hypnotherapy, which is commonly used for people that experience abduction like this in order to recall their memory and try to figure out what occurred to them. And I decided to do that. And in 2013, when I did, I then underwent several hypnosis, and I now have 10 that are public, and you can see them on my channel and also my hypnotherapist channel. Which takes me through the journey of uncovering that I had lifelong participation in the hybridization program that started at the age of 5, through the process of implantation, insemination, extraction, and then presentation, which came in 2013. So there's a process to how this is done. And through the regressions, I became aware of how I was being utilized, how the procedures were being done, how I was becoming inseminated. And I began to realize that the times that I had miscarriages, they started to make sense. And the times that I was getting pregnant without a partner also started to make sense. And I never questioned that before, because when I went to the doctor to talk about it, the doctor said that it was a blighted ovum, or it was stress or anxiety, and something normal or hormonal that was happening in the body. But the interesting thing about the experiences is that every time that something like this would happen, it would result in a medical issue. So for example, I would become severely sick. And when I went to the doctor to get checked out, the doctor would not really be able to understand what was happening. He would diagnose something, for example, an amoeba, which happened to me, but he couldn't identify what kind of amoeba. He said it was potentially an amoeba, and you know, the body was like suffering. He told me, you're going to die if you don't take antibiotics. And I started to take them, and in 1 week everything was gone, but I'm allergic to antibiotics, so we couldn't have taken any of the antibiotics full cycle, but then it was disappeared. So what I found through the regression is that these experiences were a result of the implantation and the insemination of the fetus, basically, that is genetically modified. And as, of course, the human is trying to battle, you know, this foreign specimen that's in the body, it really causes a lot of stress on the body in many different ways. And so this is the thing where I'm now trying to focus research on, because why isn't this something that we're discussing? You know, what I found out over the past few years is that really a lot of women experience this, and it's not just a handful. We're talking about hundreds of women that are writing to me now about their experiences, and the story is always so similar. So what I come to question at that point is this some kind of psychosis, collective psychosis that we're all experiencing? And if so, we should be studying that too, if it's a phenomena. Or, you know, is this really happening? Are we truly being inseminated by these extraterrestrials carrying and having the extraction? The side effects physically, emotionally, psychologically are there. So this is why I dedicate my time to kind of having these questions, and just like you, trying to understand why these hybrids are being made.
Exactly. And of course, of all the ailments a woman could go through in their life, how does It's yet, we always assume that immaculate pregnancies and all that kind of stuff happen in religion. It's related to religion. How do we get so far removed and go straight into alien species?
It really is something that, I mean, I'm neither religious, and before that, I wasn't religious either, or interested in the alien phenomena. So all of this really came abruptly for me. But here's the thing. You do some simple research. And so let's go back to the genetic modification or the genetic evolution, as you were mentioning earlier. I mean, in Mesopotamia, we begin to see the origins of life on this planet, and we begin to see traces throughout history. And what's very interesting about it is, because I was so new to this topic, how I learned about all of this was through my hypnosis regression. I never read a single book about historical timelines. I never read a book about the Book of Enoch, or any of this book, or any of the amazing researchers that you discussed earlier, which I now have become familiar with. I wasn't aware of any of those things. And so in the hypnosis, I'm being presented to, these ancient beings that are called the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki, they're showing me that they are around the entire world. The entire world has petroglyphs of Anunnaki everywhere from Bolivia, Peru, to Mexico, all the way back to Egypt and India and even China. We have petroglyphs of these incredible beings that are all reciting the same tale, which is this higher intelligence descends from above and breeds with these beings, right? So it's very interesting that we have some kind of documentation, whether it's petroglyph or it's written in some kind of scripture, like the Emerald Tablets, the Book of Gilgamesh, the Book of Enoch, which describes this process of hybridization, basically, or the genetic alteration of our gene code since the origin of life on this planet. So it's very interesting to look at that. And the more research you begin to look down that path, it's very interesting. We actually do have some of this in religion, and the funny thing about it is, when you start to look at the artifacts that were these incredible paintings that were done about Virgin Mary and Jesus, there are paintings that were made, including something that looks like saucers, or something that depicts these beings in the same fashion that's being depicted internationally, globally, during that time, in a time where we don't have the technology or the connection for that kind of, that kind of information to get around on that level. If that happened now, we can understand, but it's very interesting. So how do we link those two? We're clearly questioning the genetic timeline, and we go deeper into that. Let's look at our DNA. How does information get deposited? Right now, biology looks like dark DNA, and it's a huge question. We tend to completely dismiss dark DNA as something we don't understand. But as you mentioned, there's so much research that's going into that. And actually, one of the things that I have discovered in my research is that DNA, how it stores information, is not just like a filing cabinet. I mean, it's a holographic system that deposits information not just in the brain, but the entire body. So if we look at experiencers like myself that have this kind of unlocked memories that are all of a sudden surfacing, and you look at also other scriptures in the past, it's like a repetitive story that keeps telling itself over and over again. So in reality, the hybridization program is not something new. It's just something that is not known. It's not surfacing unless you experience it and you're taken down that path to research it.
Now, I have a question. What's the correlation between the Phoenix Lights and what you're talking about? Is there any correlation?
Well, I don't know if there's a correlation. I mean, there's a lot of sightings of UFO. The UFO phenomena is well, here's the thing. There seems to be a question between the connection between actually seeing a craft and experiencing the abduction, right? People that experience abduction, some of their stories, they start by seeing craft, and then later on that evening, they experience having abduction experiences. I myself have not researched the Phoenix Light enough to know whether there's a correlation. But my first question would be, I mean, such a massive sighting. How many of those people experienced dreams of being taken on board a craft or some kind of phenomena of that sort, of having a participation in a hybridization program, or even just contact? You know, whether it's psychological or a collective phenomena that happened for the entire city, you know, that's where I would start questioning that. Now, this is a complex topic, Katie, because in reality, the UFO phenomena, I mean, our US government does have that kind of technology. There is the reverse technology of the same, you know. And so the more you go deeper into the rabbit hole, you start to uncover these things. So it's not so simple to say that they are linked. However, the hybridization program, there are several programs. There is a program that is extraterrestrial, and there is also a terrestrial program. And I've been a part of that as well later after I became public. And there's a reason for that, you know. So it's a complex thing. And so this is where we begin to dive a little bit deeper into this topic of hybridization. And my question was, what makes the human so incredibly valuable that it's being utilized for genetically splicing and creating more humans that are modified with other organisms? There must be something within the code that is unique to our planet, or, you know, the environment that we live in, that is necessary for that. And the answer is yes. You know, the human is one of the most incredible advanced biotechnologies that we are experiencing here.
Exactly. And it's incredible to find that there are so many different ways to look at it. We have we've got my lab incidents, we've got super soldiers in one of that as well.
Mhm.
There are all these little projects that are going on, and I see me, because I've never been an experiencer. Maybe I have. I'll talk to you about that a little later, but
Okay. Yes.
I'm not sure. But either way, it's so hard to believe that there are different things for, you know, different utilizations for different things. How alien species come in and dice and splice and do what they want to create something bigger and better than they already have. Question is, are they going to stay here, or are they just really just inhabiting for now and leaving?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say really that what I've realized is, look, if we are holographic in a sense, if we are storing massive amounts of information, first of all, in order to be in this physical body, something is occurring at the time of birth that is somehow how should I say it? Let's say it is it's like disabling perhaps certain aspects of our access to that DNA or that code in which we can turn it into memories and experience and access that information. But what that's also telling us is that our DNA and what we're made of is inclusive of information that could be of the entire universe, really. And physics of our body and the biology of our body really does show that. I mean, within a tiny little nucleus, we have the energy of the entire universe. So we're looking at fractals. So the human is like a fractal embodiment of all the information of everything that's happening. So what I've understood is that the deeper we go in and try to question these, and that's what I've done in my life through my regressions, is being able to ask these questions so that I can understand what is occurring. Of course, it's from my perspective, but I believe that what's occurring is actually somewhat a rebalancing of polarity. Okay, And so because I want to take it on a much higher level, because the truth is we can really get lost in stories and ideas of why this is occurring on our planet Earth, and even look at history. But the reality, it's very hard to say this is fact, right? It's very hard to say this is the fact. The only thing that we can do is look at what we are here and how we are evolving. And I think that shows us a little bit of how where we've come from and where we're going. I believe that the human body is really has been genetically modified. Many aspects of the DNA have been activated for the human body and are continuously being activated through the development of our consciousness and the evolution, the natural evolution of the human body. We are constantly moving. And so, this information comes in waves. It's accessible to us in waves, in a sense. This is the design of the universe. It is moving in a spiral form in which we are going through cycles of evolution. So maybe these extraterrestrials are a representation or embodiment of a species that requires a certain amount of life force or an energy that can allow them to survive. But then we also have the human program, right? So the human program is also doing experiments by taking our genetic material and using that in a hybridization or cloning program. So I questioned that, and I said, why are they doing that? So within the human body, within just the spine, okay, there was a test that was done with mice that they sent them down a little maze. And even though they cut out about 98% of their brain, they still remember, they still had the memory to be able to go down that maze. And so what that allows us to understand is that how information is being programmed into the body is holographic in a sense, because it's not stored in one location or one cell or one part of your brain. The entire body is a neurological network that is communicating, it's intercommunicating with one another. So if you take a little piece of the human body, particularly from the spine, you are literally have the ability to recreate. So the human programs are utilizing from the spine. And the reason why I know this is because I've experienced that. It happened to me. I had this experience where I was taken from one of the conference that I was speaking at and taken to an underground base, and literally they did a spinal tap to remove some material from my spine to the point where I couldn't move for like 3 months. And so I begin to question, why is this occurring? So on the other side, extraterrestrials, what makes this? What makes the human so valuable is this design of this holographic system that intercommunicates. But what is creating the propelling the life force moving through the body is what we know as a soul. Okay, and so we begin to look at the non-physical aspects of the body, because we're talking about holograms. We have to look at the non-physical, because holograms are not physical. They're networks of information. And so because of my ability to be able to see the multidimensional body, our human body actually has layers. And of course, many people have access to seeing this through their meditations and after they become aware of their bodies. But you begin to notice that we have layers of information that we're actually holding on to that based on the dimension. Okay, right now we're in 3D, everything's physical, so everything is oscillating at a certain rate in order to create matter, which we're touching. But when you start getting into other dimensions, matter starts to change. The way it starts moving, the speed that it moves, and what it's creating begins to change. So these interdimensional beings that are coming into contact with us are oscillating at different rates. And when they abduct me, they change my rate of my body in order to match theirs so that I can, interact with them. So one of the things that's interesting is that there's a survey that was done, a paperclip survey. And the paperclip survey was done about abductees. And what's interesting about that is that a lot of the results that they got after interviewing 4,000, or I'm sorry, I can't remember how many they were included in that, but it was a substantial number, enough to be able to get some parameters of comparison, right? And so a lot of them became psychic or have expressed, activated psychic abilities or awareness. So, you know, one thing is to say this is a psychological phenomena, but when it's actually affecting the body on a level that is, it's changing, literally, your DNA is changing by having this kind of experience, I think there's something there. You know, and so what we want to kind of question is the next step as to these hybrids that are being created, because they're not just being taken on crap, they're actually being somehow reinserted back into our reincarnation cycle. Why do I say this? We can look at Mary Rodwell. She is an incredible researcher that talks to hybrid children here on the planet Earth. Okay, so these children at the age of 8 are talking about incredibly advanced physics that are, you know, beyond the physics that are being taught at Harvard or whatever educational institution, things that we are just learning about and discovering now. So well, you have to look at the research to understand what I'm talking about. But we're talking about children that have memory of being on other planets, that have memory of having extraterrestrial contact. Little children that are not influenced by television or their parents' conversation at the age of 5, 6, 7. They're already drawing out these things. So there's a communication that's happening. And it's my idea that it is something that is literally encoded within our DNA.
That's interesting you say that, because why do you think that psychic abilities start to come out when abductions occur?
Yeah, that's such an important question, Katie, because then it helps us look, and my mind is like this. I cannot make assumptions without, or even just accept things without understanding how things function on the back end. And so that's why I started to research DNA, because you know, I'm like, why do they want to continue creating children? And they're not just using our DNA, they're combining it with other species, because these children are, when you look at them, you know, and I'll share some pictures of them, they have these much larger eyes. The iris is the size of our ocular socket. Their structure of their body is a little bit thinner. Some of the children that I have, I met in person, 4 of them. One of them has like scaly skin, almost like a reptilian. So obviously they're genetically modified in a sense, but more than that, it's the level of, it's not just the genetic modification, it's their human expression, their physical expression is beyond what we are here in humans. You know, we don't have telepathic abilities. We can develop them. There's a way to develop them, but that means that these are highly evolved souls. And how does someone have an expression like that? It's in the code. I know that we look at our gurus and our most highly advanced spiritual beings that are said, like Jesus, for example, that are said to have these magical powers and these abilities throughout history. There have been examples of people that have been, you know, having these kinds of abilities to have interdimensional contact and whatnot. So those are people that have dedicated their time to really unlocking, deprogramming aspects of themselves and unlocking and activating aspects of themselves. And that's why we talk about DNA activation. When we are able to unlock all of the suffering, pain programs from the body, you're then able to raise your frequency, but also you change the chemistry of the body. You change your mind, you change your psychology, and you change and begin to unlock things that you're capable of doing, including these kinds of psychic abilities, right? So there's obviously been some kind of chemical shift in that experience when you're taking. And so for something to happen overnight, like in my case, and many cases of many people that have experienced psychic abilities one day to the next, there is some kind of experience that's being taken into an interdimension that's not into our dimension, which activates and changes the chemistry of that body. So when they're inserted back into the timeline, it's completely different what they're experiencing. And so when you begin to go through these regressions of people that have experienced abduction, you begin to notice the times that they became sick are correlated to some of these abduction experiences. And it's very interesting because it kind of shows you how the human body otherwise would not be able to tolerate such a shift in dimension. So it's very interesting to kind of look into that. And I think it's an activation of our code. Our what we know as our DNA holds the ability. Right now, scientists are experimenting with genetically modified DNA on babies. I mean, we had a famous doctor in China, a researcher. I think his name was Jin Shu. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. I will remember it in just a moment. But he created the world's first, well, public genetically modified twins, where they were able to modify from their DNA the AIDS coding in their DNA. Okay, they were able to disengage it so that basically it's not activated in the body. The father had AIDS, the mother was healthy, so the children inherited that gene, and they were able to cut it out with the CRISPR machine. Basically, they cut it out, so they can genetically modify that. So what that's telling us, basically, and if we can change color of our eyes, color of our body, how the body works, it's within the code that results in what we are. So we can also activate aspects of ourselves in order to result in these kinds of abilities, these psychic abilities that are incredibly advanced.
So for you, what abilities did that bring on for you?
Yeah, so immediately the next Monday, I had the ability not only to feel and know everything that the person that was sitting next to me was thinking and feeling, but seeing the entire energetic body per se. I mean, I saw lights, colors, a stagnation of energy within the body. And now I know the lingo, but back then, I was still very new to all of this. Earlier on, I was certified in pranic healing, which kind of talks about life force energy moving through the meridian bodies and whatnot. But one thing is studying it, and another thing is feeling and seeing it. And after a couple years of becoming more familiar and comfortable with that ability, because it was intolerable the first 3 months, it was literally painful for my body to be able to go out. I mean, my arms would hurt, my entire body would hurt because I was incredibly sensitive. Just being next to someone would cause me anxiety. If they were feeling anxiety, I would feel powerful anxiety. If someone was thinking something, I would feel it. So it's like unzipping these empathic abilities to level 200 overnight. So it took some time to kind of get back, and I wasn't working during those 3 months, and I had my business to run. I was sick in bed, during that time, until I became, I started to seek help for that and try to speak with shamans and whoever I can get a hand on to help me understand what was occurring with me. And so as a result, after the years of training and doing this, after my hypnosis regression, where I was being shown through that regression. And so one of the things I want to stress is that why this was so powerful for me is that when you put someone that is completely in meditation mode up to 8 hours a day, they have a very clear mind. So I don't have any negative emotions, pain emotions, fears, anxieties. I've been working really hard on deprogramming those. So your mind becomes clean. It's not tainted by television, music, or anything. So in this clean slate, when I went into the hypnosis, I began to see all this information about our historical timeline. And it took me all the way back to Mesopotamia and 3 main lineages of extraterrestrials and the historical timeline up until today. I had to question everything. I had to question our society. I had to question why things were the way they were, people that were in power, why systems and organizations are being run the way they are. And I began to understand a lot about our reality. And so I saw the need to utilize my gifts to be of service in whatever way I can. So if I can guide someone in helping them understand why they're storing this pain in their body, it relieves that pain. It relieves that suffering. They are no longer ill. They're no longer sick. And they're healing, right? So it's very interesting. The way I look at things, including healing, it's a complete rebalancing of polarity on all levels. And I said that at the beginning. I think that it's internal, micro, and macro. And I think that it's happening with any expression of parasitic consciousness, what I call parasitic consciousness, which is basically consciousness that chooses not to be aware of itself, becomes parasitic, to consciousness that does want to become aware of themselves, like me and you, like people that are searching for answers, right? And so I think we're kind of moving through those polarities on many levels, especially now as we see in our world. So it's just one expression of that.
So can I ask, I know this is going to sound a little direct, what alien species was, quote unquote, after you?
Yeah, so it's not, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily after me. You know, what I've understood is that these alien races that are here on this planet are evolutions of consciousness that come into material form. And they come into material form based on the vibrational frequency, okay? So the frequency will define their consciousness. So the species that are, let's say, more nefarious or trying to do some awful things, which they have, are draconian. I've been a part of 4 different programs. I've been part of a draconian program, a reptilian, a humanoid program that the Pleiadian, they call themselves Pleiadian, and then a terrestrial program, okay, which is our government. So 4 of those, and I've seen them and interacted with them since the age of 5, and continue to experience with them over the past 5 years consciously.
So what alien species are they? Or how many really are there?
Well, they can be infinite. I mean, we look at the universe. Every single little dot is a planet. I mean, there are infinite possibilities for races, for genetic modifications. Maybe the genetic modification that we're talking about is very, you know, it's just for our immediate galaxy potentially. But the potential life forms could be infinite, really. The ones that we seem to be aware of. My good friend Misha Johnston, she studies the different races, and she and several other people talk that there's 34 or 40. I don't know the exact number, how many they say they've seen based on their experience. But I think there's millions potentially. Now, the ones that I was involved in was a draconian. Supposedly the draconian, in what we know from what we hear and what we've all experienced collectively on this planet, they're supposedly the oldest race. From the draconians, they are descendants from the archons, okay, the Anunnaki, the archons, and from the creation of life on this planet, originating from that consciousness that we wanted to become singular. And from the draconians, we're then creating all of the races, the alien races, including the reptilians, the Pleiadians, Arcturians, you name it. I think that what happened is that they are just an expression of frequency, just as much as humans are. Okay, so now that's also going to dictate the kind of program that they have or how they carry out their agenda, their hybridization. The darker one would utilize me to create hybrids in my body. The technology that they had to use was very affecting on the body. They would literally have to insert into the body some kind of blue liquid gel, and within the gel they would then insert the fetus, for example, because it's a fetus that has been genetically modified with such low frequency beings that they're probably not even necessarily human or physical. They might even be just interdimensional beings of some sort. And so when they took them out, you know, they look like a little creature. It doesn't look like a human or something that we can be familiar with. The other ones, the reptilians, as I mentioned, you know, they also create programs. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Again, there's polarity in everything. So you can't just say one race is negative and one is bad. That would be ignorant and not true. You know, there is that in everything. So the Pleiadian humanoids are the ones that create these kinds of human looking hybrids, which we're seeing reincarnating back into our human cycle. And it's interesting looking at Mary Rodwell's work, because the children, a lot of times they look quite different. They really do look like children that are not human. The children that are coming in, you know, they have different eyes, they have different, they feel different energetically. So it's interesting how they're doing that. So there's many different programs, and I believe that the government is aware of these programs, just because of my personal experience and what I've seen being in the underground base. And I think that there's participation. I think there's collaboration with on and off programs.
And so the reason why I'm asking about the species, because I've previously been told that I'm an Arcturian.
Oh, amazing. That's beautiful.
But I'm not sure on it. So that's why I was trying to ask you about the species, because I'm like going, so if different species do different things, then you know, and I've been told that I'm an Arcturian, so what is my purpose?
That's amazing. You know, again, and this is sometimes I think people get caught up in a misconception that things are black and white or only one way, but we experience polarity in everything. So even in this Arcturian, I mean, some people say Arcturians are only white, only white. But the thing is this, I question consciousness, Katie, because it's such an incredible thing that we need to educate ourselves on how it functions. Because when consciousness manifests itself, it can be controlled and manipulated in many different ways. And the intention of that consciousness, which is basically what they're doing, they are taking a fractal of your soul, and it's the soul that provides life force or life juice, you can say, for these beings that they're trying to create, that they're manufacturing, that they're genetically modifying. And it is the soul that is the direct connection to that infinite consciousness, that source, whatever we want to call it. But that's the thread and the fabric of life. And if that's the case, there's a lot of things that come as a result of that. It can be consciousness that is aware of itself. These are just laws of the universe. You know, what happens when consciousness becomes aware of itself? It becomes creative. It wants to create. And we just have to look at the physics of our current universe to understand that that's the way we function here, you know. In order, we live in the law of three, which is we need the divine feminine, the masculine, in order to create a product. And within that understanding, the investment of those two energies in balance are creating life. And so in that same way, when our bodies are out of balance, we can't create, we become ill. So let's take it on a bigger picture. If there is this, let's take the universe with all its living beings. If there are aspects of consciousness that are rejecting themselves, they become parasitic. So they want to feed off the life force of another, like these hybridization programs. And then there's also other humans, other manifestations, not humans, any manifestation. And they become aware of themselves. And so that's the polarity. So they are more creative. So I think it's a choice. And more than that, we are so interconnected in this entire universe. We're one. There's no separation. Within our DNA, we have all of those races within us and more that we don't even know of. You know, within our genetic code, we hold that. And what that means is that we have the ability of accessing that information in the present moment. When you go into hypnosis and you begin to see these races, you become familiar with them. And sometimes you even recognize a past life, per se, that you've experienced as an Arcturian or a blue being or a reptilian or whatever. So somehow, collectively on this planet, we have some kind of information that is encoded in our DNA that we are all somehow accessing this from, because it's one thing to say that it's a group of a few people that are seeing the same kind of races, but it's another thing to say that the entire collective race is seeing these races manifest in whatever form is being shown to them, like a reptilian, right? How did we come up with that? There's a lot of reasons for that. We can go back to alien lore. We can go back to the stories from, Anunnakis and whatnot. Or we can even look at the biology of the body and the reptilian brain and how it's the first thing that's developed in the body. And then from there, it creates everything. We can even look at the fetus and how it starts as a little tadpole, and then evolves back into this human body. So there's a lot of things in our universe that are a demonstration of these different, I guess, ranges of manifestation of life forms. And I think that we have all of them within us, and we have access to all of them. You have an Arcturian aspect, but you also probably have a reptilian aspect somewhere in there, and maybe it's not so immediate. And myself, I have draconian, reptilian, and Arcturian as well. I think that as we activate our DNA, we can have access to the ranges of different consciousness in this universe. That's what I think.
It's interesting that you say that too, because I from a personal experience, given my professional background, I do a lot of biofeedback, and of course with alien hybridization and all that kind of stuff, introducing alien inhabitants into our mind, body, and soul, we tend to change our thought patterns a lot, and so we tend to decipher the undecipherable without realizing how we decipher it in the first place. And
indeed,
so by by ridding the negative, we can enforce the positive, but in a much better way to actually understand the process that we're going through. And the reason why I'm asking that is because we're just about to go to have a break. But and after the break, I would love to talk to you about the process of regression and how you go through that, and in order to find out how many children that you actually had and what the experiences that you had. So remembering those experiences, it's one thing to experience, but it's also another to actually remember the experience itself in fine detail. And I can only say that regression therapy helps with that. Yeah.
absolutely, tremendously. Well, it depends if you're ready, and we can talk more about that when we get back. If you're ready to understand, because it is traumatic. It took me a minute to process what I was even looking, and I don't think in my deepest reaches of my mind I could have made up such complex experiences, so yeah.
Exactly. With that said, guys, you are listening to Somafusion Radio with your host, Katie Kamara. Stick around. We are going to go on break. Remember to like, share, subscribe the video. Let everybody know that what we're listening to each week and what we're learning. And after the break, we will be talking about the process of regression in order to remember what we are experiencing. and welcome back. You are listening to Somafusion Radio with your host, Katie Kamara, and we are talking to our guest, Geraldine Orozco, tonight. And tonight, I would love to talk about, switch gears and talk about the regression therapy that, Geraldine, you had when you were going through finding out about your hybrid children and becoming a hybrid mother and all your experiences from being a abductee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. So the hypnosis process was interesting. When I went under hypnosis at first, my first initial question, because you have to go in with questions, was to understand whether what happened to me was actually real and I wasn't making it up. Even though I have, activated psychic abilities, I still questioned, how it was possible that I would have hybrid children, because I wasn't finding any answers that were, satiating that thirst for understanding it. So, I went in to do the hypnosis, and I went with an open mind again after deprogramming a lot of fears that I had around it. So I had a spiritual foundation, and I think that I was clear in the fact that whatever the answer was going to be, I was going to be open to accepting it and, being brave and processing it from there. And I think sometimes for a lot of people that are questioning whether they want to do hypnosis, that's an important thing to think about, right? Because you're gonna get answers, and sometimes those answers might not be something that you might like to hear. Yeah, and so when I went into it, I first started by questioning whether it was real, and I found out that I had actually not just the 8 that were shown to me and the 4 that I had actually met on the craft during that experience in 2013, but I had 24 hybrid children with 4 different hybridization programs. And so I began to question, okay, how did it come to be? How come I didn't realize this was happening? How come I wasn't even interested in the ET phenomena? I would think it would at least trigger an interest in ET phenomena subconsciously, which is what happens to a lot of abductee women or men. So when I found out, my first regression confirms the abductions, it confirms the contact times, and it confirms how many children I had. Second regression really took me into the process. I went back to the age of 5 and so on and so forth to try to understand how this procedure was being done. And so this is how it was for me. At the age of 5, I was taken in on board a craft. And it's funny because after review, I realized that the memory that had come up in the regression was a memory that for some reason I could not get out of my mind. Even till, up until that moment, I would still remember being in my mother's room and seeing a light over the pool, because we lived right on top of a pool. And I saw a little light, but back then I thought it was just the light of, the pool or something like that. And so in the regression, it came up. It was the very first thing, and it was the first time that I was taken on board a craft, and I was presented to these draconian beings, these very terrifying looking beings that are like half reptilian, half male beings that are using me to get information from me. So they're using me in some kind of a remote viewing process. And if some of you know how the remote viewing is done, the child or whoever is put into water, a bath of water, naked. Well, I was naked in that experience, and they were using me to remote view an experience that had happened on Earth. And they had also implanted some things in my body, in the spinal cord and in the very back of my uterus. Okay, and that was in preparation for when I was going to be utilized, and at the same time monitoring the body for when it was ready for hormone levels, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure it reports all kinds of information that's in your body to them. And that was one of the first times that I got sick. Then The second time in my regression, it was when I was the age of 16. I was in South America in Bolivia. I lived there for 2 years during high school. And I was walking down a cobblestone road. Next thing you know, I'm being taken. It was dark at night. There was nobody around in the town. It's a very, very small little town in the middle of nowhere. So as I'm walking, I'm being taken from the earth. Next thing I know, I'm on top of this black space. And I'm being sat on something that looks like a dental chair, but more minimal. And they began doing procedures on my body, and that's when the first insemination occurred. We're talking about like some kind of a sleeve with some kind of a syringe, a metallic syringe that goes into the uterus and then begins the insemination. And the insemination is feeling, I start to feel what's happening. It's incredibly cold liquid that's being put into the body. And for the first time in my life, when I'm returned back to my room, the next thing I remember, so in other words, I had missing time from the time that I was walking down the street. I used to tutor English, and so the class would end like around 8 or 9 at night. And so from 8, 9 p.m. until sometime in the morning is when I'm in my bed and I'm wake up feeling aroused for the first time in my entire life. I never experienced that feeling before that moment. And so weeks later, they remove the fetus. Okay, so in other words, I became pregnant and I was a virgin. I never had sex before that moment. But I became pregnant, and it's funny because that was the second time that I became quite ill with nausea. And my uncle, which was a doctor, would say, "Oh, you probably ate something bad. It must be food poisoning, right? At the age of 16, you're not thinking anything else." So that was the explanation. What I discovered at that moment is that I started to have a sensitivity to antibiotics and medication. And that's something that's very interesting to note, because a lot of hybrid mothers and fathers develop a sensitivity to chemicals. So from that moment, and the reason for that is because they don't want any of those chemicals introduced into the system that would taint what is being produced and created into the body. Okay, so at that point I became allergic to a lot of things, and later on the allergies became worse. I was allergic to birth control, allergic to antibiotics, medicine. I mean, I don't even take painkillers of any kind till now, ever. So your chemistry in your body is changing as a result of this. Okay, so when they did the extraction, they come back, and you're not even showing. We're talking about the longest time that I've had a gestation is 3 months. So at that time, it was probably about 3-4 weeks. So we're talking about literally just the first beginning splicing of the cells, that they are taking the fetus out. It's like a zygote. It's not even developed into a fetus yet, that they take out of the body. And when they remove it, they move it into these spherical tanks that looks like a tank with an artificial umbilical cord that is then feeding life into that zygote. And the gestation process continues within these tanks. At a later time, later on in my life, I was taken again. And of course, during hypnosis, I'm looking at specific events, but it took 10 regressions to kind of piece together different events that had occurred, right? So I'm getting different details and different experiences from those times. And what I found the most impactful of those was when I saw the walls of these tanks, lined walls full of these spherical tanks with fetuses developing in them at different stages. And it also helps me understand, pardon me, that one of the things that they're doing is they are advancing or speeding up the gestation process in the body, because within a week or 2 weeks, the fetus that they're removing, or the zygote that they're removing, is much more developed than what would normally be in a regular human process of pregnancy. And so further, the other experience that happened was at the age of, I believe it was 23 or 24 years old. that this is the time when I got the amoeba. They inserted into my arm a gigantic syringe with a blue liquid that came into my body, also down my mouth, into my body, down my throat, a tube that inserted into the body that goes into the blood system, this kind of blue liquid that they have, and also in the uterus that creates some kind of gel-like substance that's coating the uterine lining, so that when they inseminate, it is being able to sustain the environment for this kind of a species that they have genetically modified. Otherwise, we would probably die. We probably wouldn't be able to sustain it in the body. And as a result of that experience, I ended up having this amoeba that the doctor was unable to identify. And it took me down this horrible path of 3 weeks of being horribly ill. And then from one day to the next, everything was fine. The amoeba, amoebas don't disappear in 3 weeks, especially if you're not taking a full cycle of antibiotics. So the doctor was very confused and said, oh, that's very interesting that that happened. But you're never going to link it to extraterrestrial contact because it's just not in your reality, you know? Another thing that's very interesting is that as a result of the extraction of the fetus is that I developed cysts. And at the age of 16 in Bolivia, I developed a really advanced cyst in the body, which I have pictures of, because it's what the doctor said is that it's a cyst that's the size of a woman that's much older, probably had pregnancies and other things like that. At the age of 16, that was developed. So at that time, we didn't think anything of it because I wasn't even sexually active at the time. And so we're thinking, well, it's just what it is. And it wasn't necessarily interfering unless there was an insemination that was happening. So these are the kinds of experiences that are important to talk about, and sometimes they're hard to hear and hard to, really integrate. But I share these experiences because I get the emails from women that end up with endometriosis, that end up with all kinds of reproductive problems as a result, direct result of their involvement in the hybridization program, because it's not just hormonal imbalances in the body. We're talking about trauma so PTSD as a result of contact experiences with extraterrestrials, which they believe are with extraterrestrials. So none of them are separate. It's all one thing that happened together. And so that's what makes these experiences unique and something that we need to pay attention to.
I find it very, very interesting too. Is there any correlation between miscarriages, ovarian cysts that may be in a woman's body, and then those cysts rupturing? Could that have any link?
It could be. I mean, I don't know. The answer is I'm not sure. Obviously, I'm not a gynecologist to be able to explain that all the way. But I will tell you from my experience and from the stories that I hear from women that write to me, trying to figure out what's happening. One of the symptoms that happens a lot is endometriosis, because they develop scarring due to numerous DNC procedures, in other words, to take out the fetus out of the body, right? And so if you were to have a miscarriage, you have a DNC to clear out the uterus, to clean out anything that was left behind. What happens is that a lot of times women, when they become pregnant, there's a story of the woman in the film Extraordinary Seeding that is a lesbian. So she's never been with a man. She becomes pregnant up to 3 months, I believe it was, and then the child disappears. Okay, so she's literally showing, she has all the symptoms, and this is what happens. We become pregnant, you get sick, you're throwing up, the breast, the whole 9 yards. And women, that your cycle is very different from when you're pregnant, right? That's completely different. You're going to be experiencing completely different things, and a little bit more advanced. But every pregnancy is different. We're not going to talk about the details of that, but I'm saying with detailed experiences with dreams and feeling that you are being introduced to hybrid children, or you're being taken and operated or worked on onboard craft, if you're having miscarriages directly after that happened, you know, that's definitely something to look at. There's a lady named April Malloy who was also in the film that was unable to have children. And this is another thing, I can't have children, okay, as a result of that. Every time that I become pregnant, I have a miscarriage. And the thing is, at the miscarriage, there is no fetus. The fetus is missing. So this is something that the gynecologist questions, but he says it must be a blighted ovum. Okay, and clinically, that's been their explanation for a very long time. They've never done a clinical research to try to understand the correlation between abduction phenomena and this miscarriages, or having the pregnancy. So what else did I want to say about that? That's pretty much it. Did I answer your question, Katie? I'm trying to think. I think there was one more thing I wanted to say, but I can't remember.
No, you definitely did, because I'm just wondering what the rates of how many women out there, because I know that there's a lot of women that are either trying to get pregnant or they have very huge symptoms of phantom pregnancies that really don't even, they're not even explainable. But you can't. I mean, it's a medical condition. Like for instance, phantom pregnancies are a medical condition.
Yeah.
There's no substantial research behind it to even equate to what is even going on. And I wonder how many of those women out there are experiencing, let's just say, for phantom pregnancies, who are actually having symptoms of being abducted for these programs, and then trying to recollect everything that, because I mean, it's horrible for a woman to go through. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
But how much of it do we dream, and how much of it is reality, and how much of it do we actually see this in our waking presence?
Exactly. And so that's where I would like to dedicate time to research, is really take it serious and see how many of these women are having these experiences. Because over the past, let's see, now since 2016, 17, that I'm now open and public about this, people are writing to me, telling me, and I'm telling you, I get hundreds of email from women with the same story. Geraldine, I didn't know that this was a thing. So I had the dream, and then I have the miscarriage. Could it be that I'm a part of the hybridization program? And they're always, these are professional women, CEOs, people that are working in the field, that are, corporate, everything, from everything to somebody that's working at, the local grocery store. They are experiencing these kinds of things at every level of education. So it's not like these people are deeply into the phenomena and wish or have these fantasies of experiencing such a thing. These are average, normal people that have families sometimes, or normal lives, that are experiencing the phenomena. So that's what deserves attention. The other thing is that women that can't get pregnant are also ending up becoming pregnant after having contact, which is another part of the phenomena that we haven't even talked about, which Mary Rodwell also touches in her book. Women that can't have children have these experiences with interdimensional beings, and then all of a sudden they become pregnant, and the child absolutely is highly advanced hybrid per se, that is, talking about quantum physics at the age of 6 years old. And that's the case with April Malloy from the film, that has this child that's incredibly special. I mean, the stories, we couldn't even begin, but it's incredible what is occurring. If there was a way to medically research this and do a really good survey, a well done, research on it, I think it definitely deserves, how much is real? How much are we making up? I mean, here's the thing, and that's why I focus on researching consciousness, because really, as I said, we live in a holographic reality. We can make up, and we can intentionally experience any number of things. So the question is, what is seeding in our mind or creating this kind of idea of a phenomena? you know, for us as a human race. And if that's the case, that deserves a study as well. I was speaking with a professor that wrote the only existing medical research that has been done on a hybridization program. Actually, not even hybridization, just the idea of abduction. And his perspective is, he's never, and I spoke to him, I said, how come you haven't done research about women that become pregnant? He says, well, we haven't done it yet, but that's a good idea. We really should do it, because there are women, and we've encountered them in our research. What he thinks the phenomena is everyone that has a surgery or has had what is it called, the anesthetic put into the body, the anesthesia causes a side effect that can occur years later, of images of being operated on or worked on in some kind of environment, right? But then what about those that had not experienced any surgery at their early age, which is a lot of these experiencers are that. So it doesn't explain the phenomena, you know? So it's an unknown. It's phenomena because we still are trying to understand ourselves within it, Katie. And all we can do is continue asking questions and talking about it, because it's such taboo. I myself had to question 20 million times before I became public with this, because you're going to go into public scrutiny, of course. And being public with my business back then, you know, I had to think twice about whether I wanted to be alien person, and then my business, you know, maybe people would look at me weird. But I think it's important, and it's a necessary conversation.
Exactly. And what are the experiences? I know that we've been talking about female abduction experiences. What about the men?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because just like the women, the men are experiencing. I just spoke to a gentleman the other day that is heavily traumatized as a result of his experience, to the point where he can't even find a partnership at this point, because of the things that he's experiencing. So with men, it's different. They, in a way, right? Of course, they're not going to get pregnant. So they don't have that kind of impactful hormonal shift and medically altering, results from the hybridization program as men would. Why? But they do have the same trauma. And the reason is, for men, most men will wake up like this. Either they will have a dream of having intercourse with a being that's not human. It can be extraterrestrial, but it's normally a very traumatic experience that starts off as a woman and then changes into a reptilian or some kind of other being or something like this. So that kind of shift in that causes a tremendous amount of trauma. The second thing that happens is they have some kind of apparatus put on their body, and the semen is extracted from the body. And so this is not just a dream, it's a physical mark that is left on the body. So they are going to experience actual scarring as a result of that. And that can be the same for both men and women. But it's what makes this kind of event and experience stand out as a normal, let's say you want to call it a wet dream of a 40-year-old man, okay? And so what I hear a lot is that men will write to me and they will say, you know, it's very traumatizing and it's embarrassing to discuss this even, because I'm 40 years old, I've had a normal life, you know, I married, whatever, you know, I have a normal, regular, healthy life, and yet I've had this happen to me. I can't explain it. The only time I experience having semen on my body or marks on my body is directly connected to the images that I'm seeing or the dreams that I'm experiencing. So when they go into regression, they start to uncover more activity that has been happening. And a lot of times it's not necessarily a one-off thing. And sometimes, you know, it's something that's been happening for a long time. The other thing that I find interesting is that these men, sometimes they're into the phenomena since children. So very early on, they are showing some kind of interest in this kind of UFO phenomena. And my explanation for that is because this kind of phenomena happens, it is occurring in your lineage, okay? Through our mother's DNA, which is a mitochondrial DNA, we are holding in our body an aggregate copy of every mother and her mother down her lineage in our body. So that's how we store that information, right? And so a lot of times this kind of activity is happening to your mother, to her mother, maybe her relatives, and the mother before that, mother before that. They have experience or awareness of UFOs or extraterrestrials, or they've been experiencing somehow something that connects them to the phenomena, which is very interesting. And this is what I find in men that are also experiencing them. When we begin to speak about it, they tell me, yes, my mother has had this kind of contact or this kind of experience. And usually the conversation happens after a regression. So it's not something that's discussed at any other time other than when it starts occurring. And so the trauma that they experience can be sexual, and it's a trauma that is also, with looking at things with big eyes, like owls, or there's a whole study on how owls cause tremendous PTSD to people that are abductees and contactees. Because there's a technology that's being utilized by these extraterrestrials, which is called screening, where they will show you an image, which you're familiar with, just so they can approach you, or they can interact with you, or they can do something with you, engage with you. And then sometimes after regression, that image will disappear and their true form will show themselves in the mind of what they actually experienced. So it's a lot of manipulation of your mind and what you're experiencing, but it's very complex. There are many layers to that, and that's what the men are expressing. So just as interesting to study and to look at and to support, because these men feel incredibly alone, isolated. They can't talk about it. They can't go back to their job and say, I had a dream with an extraterrestrial. It sounds completely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just as bad as people coming out into the media saying I had sex with a ghost, and now you're coming out and saying I had sex with an alien. Like anyone would think, any person would think that you're instantly a nut job.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you bring that up, Katie, because, actually a lot of people, because they don't have extraterrestrials in their periphery, like it's not something that they're acquainted with. Anything that's paranormal or phenomenal, phenomena that's paranormal, they tend to equate it to ghosts, for example, or some other kind of, kind of paranormal things. I mean, I've had women tell me that they had sex with some angel or some beings or something like that, and we can look through historical records of this same thing. I mean, we think of the Immaculate Conception with the angel, for example. I mean, we're speaking in a language that it's familiar to us, but perhaps the question is this phenomena is this the same phenomena that we're experiencing since antiquity until now?
Well, that's exactly right. So what kind of traumas do contactees who are experiencing or have gone who are in the hybridization program?
Yeah, so it ranges. PTSD is definitely one of them, and usually it's triggered by lights at night or something. They have to have totally covered windows, and this is severe cases, of course, but some of my close friends have this thing. They can't have any open windows. It has to be completely blacked out at night, and they cover their windows so that they don't experience anything like that. People are afraid of their closet or any other doors, because that's where they feel that there's an entryway. Psychologically, they feel there's an entryway. So anything that's an entryway, they feel like they have to cover. Another thing is a sensitivity to sounds and certain humming vibrations. And this is something interesting that happened to me as well, is that later on, a couple of years after it happened to me, somehow I came across a video of a man that had recorded a UFO, the sound of the vibration of that UFO. And when I heard it, I mean, I started to cry. I came into this entire PTSD reaction where it was exactly what I had experienced when I was taken. And I hadn't remembered it until it triggered in me that emotion. you know? So certain little things like that. Also medical procedures, syringes, dental work, because depending on the program, the dental chair, and that's something that I couldn't understand why I had such a horrible trauma to dental work as well. For years, I could not get over that. And when I regressed, I realized that as a child, they had been doing all these procedures to me on something that looked like a dental chair. So that's very common. Um, Other things are, sexual problems, for example, problems with, um, you know, traumas of having seen reptilians or other beings that are there, that you don't feel safe anymore with your partner, that kind of trauma. And then of course with pregnancies is one of the most sensitive topics to talk with women, and that trauma can be very deep, right? Because when you're talking about a pregnancy, you're talking about a tremendous hormonal shift in the body that results in post-traumatic stress and postpartum depression. And also when you go through a miscarriage, the body is, immediately releasing all these hormones that it was storing in the body to prepare for the child. So a lot of women experience deep depression as a result of this. And especially when they're not able to explain or have their gynecologist explain to them what's happening, they really feel the trauma is very big. As a woman that feels that she can't carry life in her body, it's a pretty difficult thing to handle. Other things are scars on the body and markings that are shown. And so some people have what they call scoop marks, so they can have little pieces of their skin are removed, and general kinds of markings in the body, non-related to the hybridization program, can be found anywhere in the body. Related to the hybridization program, you're looking at markings by the ankles, markings by the genital areas, your spine, your neck oftentimes, and syringe marks in your forearms and in the nape of your neck. So those are the primary things, and I've experienced all of those even throughout the past few years, actually. So, yeah, those are the ones off the top of my head that I can share with you. Yeah.
Sure. With the markings, we're not just talking about a dot on your arm or a dot on your neck or anything like that. What kind of markings are we looking at?
So what they call scoop marks is literally pieces of your skin are missing from your body. And what makes them unique is that they're appearing from one day to the next. So the scar is completely healed over one day to the next. This is not a scar because obviously if you have a piece of your skin taken out, it's going to take you maybe even a month to recover fully from that, and also you're going to be in pain. And so a lot of times these scars don't have pains. They're just marks on the body that are completely healed from one day to the next. That's what makes them unique. Other scarring that you're looking at, and these are some can be temporary scarring as well. Now the dots is very interesting because the dots that show up are going to be in specific shapes or forms. Okay, so a lot of times they're triangular shapes, and so who gets some random mole on your body that looks like a triangle? That's not really something that's really very common. So specific shapes or circular shapes that are creating a design on your arm that look like moles. Now, sometimes they disappear, other times they stay. I've had cases, and even myself had experience, where after certain healings, moles disappear from one day to the next. Okay, so they're not moles, in other words. And something that I found in my research is that the US government actually has funded a program with this company, I think it's in Nicaragua or Costa Rica, in which they are manufacturing mole-like implants that go into the body using your DNA. So when I heard that, when I came across that information, it was incredible, because this is exactly what we're experiencing is I believe implants of some sort that are superficial or being shown that are in the body. Now implants is another thing. They can be metallic, bead-like metals or spherical little balls or something like that that are found underneath the skin that you can move and feel literally in the body. So that's something that people claim that they experience after abduction and after the hybridization program.
I can guarantee you some of the listeners, after hearing that, will probably just go out and start checking their body for all these marks.
That's true. That is true. There is someone that does that. They do the scanning for the body. And, you know, they say that you'll also have bioluminescence on your skin after having abduction. And when I was speaking at a conference a couple years back, I had an experience. And the next day I went to this gentleman to have him check me. And lo and behold, I had the bioluminescent marks here on my cheek and on my hands. I have a picture of that. I can put it on my website. You guys can check out. And at my website, hybridmother.com, if you notice the glowing neon lights that are showing on the skin is a depiction of that, because extraterrestrial contact with these interdimensional beings will leave markings on the body that appear bioluminescent or nuclear in a sense. You know, they're glowing in the dark, in other words, on your skin. So that's something that some researchers study.
Absolutely. And what is the RH positive and negative factor in accordance to the hybridization program and abduction?
Yeah, well, that's a really complex question, and I'm researching that further because, you know, there's a couple things, and I will tell you. I mean, what I look at is, let's look at the Nazca skulls, okay? The skulls that have been genetically tested recently, and they linked these Peruvian skulls all the way back to, can you remember the name? I don't know if you know, I can't remember the name of this very specific lineage in Europe, Eastern Europe. I'm very sorry, I can't remember the name right now. But they are a community that are well known for all of them having an RH negative. Some of you viewers must know what I'm talking about. And so their entire community is RH negative. And that's where their origin was, from these Nazca skulls. So the question is, how did that race, how did that DNA go all the way here, and it's just only collectively in this one space, right? Mm-hmm. So the reason why we want to look at that is because they say that the genetic modification, a lot of these people that are being abducted are RH negative. However, although the majority of them are RH negative, what I am uncovering by talking to women and men that are not RH negative, potentially we can all be a participant in the hybridization program. As a matter of fact, I believe it's our entire race that is a product of the hybridization program since the beginning of life on this planet. We are probably all this kind of product of a cocktail of DNA that's been modified over time. However, what RH negative could allow us to see is that it's available in a sense. It's more editable. It's more editable. And I think that's why it shows, and they remember more. They have more ability to recall what's been happening. There is some link, I believe, between the RH negative factor and your ability to recall these kinds of experiences. Because I talk to other women and men that have non-RH negative, and these are people that it takes a long time for them to come into the information. Okay, somehow there will be an impactful experience. They will go under regression, and then it will come up. So I think that we're at the beginning of all this research, and we haven't spent enough time understanding the phenomena and studying it from a medical or clinical factor to be able to understand what it is. But I really have a feeling that more of us are involved in the hybridization program than we believe, than we even are aware. Just like myself, I spent my entire life not knowing until I had such an impactful experience.
Exactly. And what's the next question I was going to ask? Oh, about star seeds.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And this is a perfect segue, right? Because if we incarnate and we self-identify as star seeds, the idea is you're a star seed, meaning that you're coming from another planet. You come from another lineage that is extraterrestrial. So if that's the case, What I think is that obviously there is an activation within your DNA for you to become aware of that aspect of yourself. And this is why I talk about ourselves as being multidimensional. We really look like webs. We're like little webs. And our consciousness in this human body may be at the center, but there's all of these other aspects of yourself that you have the ability to connect with. And I believe that some of those aspects of you, which is encoded in your holographic DNA, is extraterrestrial, or is everything that is recorded truly in the DNA, which we don't understand how to read yet. So I think that when people activate psychic abilities, begin to activate these seemingly non-human aspects of ourselves, we are tapping into other information that we actually could have access to if we focused on accessing that information. So I think that star seeds are two things. They are activating those aspects of themselves, and some of them are incarnations of hybrids, these children that are genetically modified, pretty much like everyone else. I think every other human, I think really truly we are all genetically modified humans, and I think that we just need to take a glance back at where we come from, and all the potential possibilities and theories around where we come from, to know that we don't just come from the apes. I mean, very clearly, the jump between the DNA of an ape or an orangutan or is quite large. We're only looking at one aspect of the DNA, and the dark DNA, what they call dark DNA, has massive amounts of information that we still must learn how to read and translate. And DNA is like a language. It's a language that we need to learn how to speak. How I do DNA reprogramming is by the comprehension that, and we know this through epigenetics, DNA can be written, it can be changed, right? We can write the protein based on our environment, the things that we're eating, who we're around. We can change how we are. We're not a direct result of the genetics like we once thought. We can actually shift and change that. So it's telling us something, that we have the potential of evolving or unlocking or locking aspects of ourselves in this little temporary life that we have.
And I know you mentioned about the hybrid children. Now, I know this is all new to me, so I'm just asking questions because one, I'm doing it for curiosity, and two, for the listeners as well. When we talk about hybrid children, are we talking about physical children or children that have come about from the regression that we know that we've been adopted?
Perfect. Well, we're talking about the same thing. It's the same thing. And the reason why I say that is because a couple things, very interesting cases. Women that have been participants in the hybridization program are introduced to this child in their dreams, and then they become pregnant with the child, and it's their child.
Okay.
And there's a very deep connection with the stars or aliens or extraterrestrials, and that's what we call the hybrid children, these children that are showing this incredibly strong personality and awareness that of life outside of the planet, which is not a normal fascination or some kind of connection. They talk about it as if it were one of our past lives that is very accessible to them memory-wise. They remember everything about the race. They remember everything about that. And we're not just talking about children that are just making up stories or just, doing these fantasy things. We're talking about children that are talking about accurate physics in combination with extraterrestrials, and we compare them with adults that have extraterrestrial experiences, and they're overlapping, right? What they're experiencing as these adults with these little children that are already aware of this technology, right? And all of these things that we're experiencing on board a craft, they are talking about it. And it's very unique, Katie, because the technology that we experience on board a craft is technology that's so incredibly beautifully advanced. I mean, our technology is a joke. in comparison, right? And it's all the things that we think of in the future or we haven't even thought of yet. Now, when we're talking about the hybrid kids and these star seeds, what happens to the kids that are, and we're talking about millions of tanks of these children that are being gestated to come into birth at some time. So what's being done with them, right? And the question is, some of these children are they're grown or raised on board craft in these hybridization crafts. Some of them don't make it to adult. So you got to understand that their genetic make can be edited to create basically anything that they're trying to do based on their agenda. Some of these children, they don't leave the child phase. They are the age of 5 until, whatever. And some of these genetic modifications are not sustaining. Some of them are exercises. Some of them pass away. Some of them don't manifest into an adulthood. The thing is, and this is where we talk about consciousness, when a fetus is created, there's a physical aspect to it, but there's the non-physical, which is the most important, and that's when that incredible, powerful seed of life is put in, connected to a physical body. And what it is that is actually what is the currency. This is the most important part. It's that seed of life that, whether it manifests into the form of a child, or it can then be put into some kind of a reincarnation cycle where it then is born on planet Earth or some other Earth planet, it is serving a purpose of some sort. So that is, that's where I go into my research and the topic of that, because then we're talking about the manipulation of consciousness. And so we're talking about, and how we start getting into that topic is because if we look at ourselves and the programs that we have, once you undo all these layers of your human life here, you have the question, what am I here? Who am I? Where do I come from? All these ideas, and you cannot go down that rabbit hole without touching the subject of consciousness and extraterrestrials. You can't, because you begin to realize that we are not just alone on this universe. There's more. There's trillions of stars with potential life that we don't even know about. So there's a bigger consciousness that is moving all of this and how life is manifested. And I think it's important to take that into consideration when we talk about these things, because it puts things in perspective. The children that are being put in, we're obviously looking at a new race of consciousness, a new race of genetically modified humans that are much more advanced than us. We look at our own children, look at how they handle technology. It's like second nature to them. And it's evolution, but also, we're moving quickly through these different races of consciousness, and there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm.
What is the reason is what we're all questioning.
Yeah, and so, and again, that's where we come back to the idea of polarity, which is why I bring it back to polarity, because some of these hybrids that are being made are more of a destructive essence. Some of them are very constructive. They're high vibrational beings connected with said angels or these incredible races like Arcturians, for example, that are said to be super highly evolved consciousness, right? And so, but ultimately, my question is, at what point does free will play a role here? Because listen, did I sign up to having that child? How I realized what was happening in such a traumatic way by meeting the child and then having my mind blown and my paradigm turned upside down. Is that legal? Is that right? Is that ethical? We begin to question these things. Our body is being utilized as reproductive organs, basically, for what, right? So I think that it is a much larger question, which is how consciousness is either controlled, and at what point does consciousness begin to apply free will? And I think that's something that we need to question, micro and macro, and we can even look at the events that are happening currently, right? At what point do we recognize our free will to choose how to experience things that are occurring to us? And And when you dive deeper into that, I think we begin to understand that we have free will all along. The problem is we're not aware of it.
Right.
When I decided I no longer wanted to be part of these hybridization program, I did the work. I cut cords. I broke the contracts or the energetic agreement that I had made with them in levels of unconsciousness at other times. But I think that all of us as a human race, somehow we are kind of pushed into these experiences to experience polarity, okay, whatever it is. But at some point, we got to become aware of it. Now that I stopped it and I'm no longer a part of it. And this is why I provide support for women and men that are looking to cut those negative experiences. It just depends how you look at it. You can't put it in this polarity like good and bad. It doesn't work like that. It's more complex. And I think all experiences are valuable to be able to learn and expand. As consciousness becoming aware of itself, that's what we are.
Is there any relation with all of this to the process of ascension?
I do believe there is, but it really depends on your understanding of ascension. Some people think ascension is something like 5D or some reachable point in the future timeline. What I believe ascension is, and just because we look at how time structure is in our reality, it's nonlinear. Okay, so time is nonlinear, meaning it's more like a orb, a sphere, like a spherical form, where anywhere in that sphere that is conscious, it is the present moment. This is the design of our human bodies and consciousness and the many fragments of ourselves. And it's the design of the universe, the earth, with relationship to the planets and galaxies, and how the universe is expanding and contracting at the same time. It's the function of black holes and white holes. So we can see the physics, these incredible physics, the design of creation that is nature, its basic nature of all living organisms in this universe. So, I mean, what I think ultimately is that ascension is basically the natural movement, that spiral movement that we're going through, is everything in the universe is moving, perhaps expanding and contracting. I feel that it is happening cyclically. So we're constantly moving through that. And the experiences that we experience in this moment and collectively are allowing consciousness to become aware, to choose during all those experiences to either become aware or to reject that consciousness. Okay, so all living organisms. And I think that what ascension is talking about is that choice, simply. And there's no right or wrong. All it is it's going to dictate what you're going to experience. And I think that we see that in our interrelationships with people we love, and we see that collectively in our world, and we can see that in the natural design of everything from a leaf to a galaxy that is exploding or expanding. We can also apply that to the understanding of why there is a parasitic consciousness or a consciousness that is unaware. Like David Icke talks about these reptilians that are, it's just the manifestation of that polarity, I think. But we have a choice. And I know that firsthand because of my application of this understanding, that when I choose to no longer participate, I can change how I experience things completely.
Now, you mentioned a point about manifestation. Is there at any point in the hybridization program that it can actually be manifesting as if it was something that we want?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how the mind works. That's how our psychology works. If we really want something, and it's the same thing with the idea of why they talk about, pregnancies, like women that want to get pregnant so bad that they create all these symptoms of pregnancy then, right? I mean, that can be true across the board. The power of our mind is so magnificent. It's so powerful that we have the ability to fabricate and create any number of things. The question is, how does that work on a much larger scale? So let's look at the collective, right? If the collective is feeling that we're completely hopeless and ruined and done, again, we are manifesting, in a sense, these kinds of things, or we're contributing to the creation of that thing down our timeline. We can look at our own life and our plans for tomorrow. Let's make it really simple. If I, in my mind, say tomorrow's going to be a horrible day, tomorrow will be a horrible day. You know, these are just things that this is why I think studying consciousness is important for everyone, because I believe it's an integral part of understanding life and just how we relate to everything around us, and how much power we have as an individual, as a co-creator, you can say, someone that is holographically intentionally putting life energy into something, or taking it, you know, from something. So that's a really important thing to take note, and it's very real. It can happen.
So tell me a little bit more about your upcoming book.
Yeah. So the book is a big project, Katie. I've been working on this book for 3 years, and it seems to never end. I think at this point it's going to be 3 parts, because it's a lot of different things that I want to dive into that I think are important. But we're going to talk about the hybridization program, my experience, my personal experience in detail, and also my experience with hypnosis, which was life-changing. Being able to download and say things and words that were never in my consciousness before, ever, was something that was shocking to myself. You know, saying the word Nephilim for the first time when I never heard that word in my entire life, or saying certain things, these very complex concepts of our government, the things that our president is doing, things that have happened in history that changed the course of history. Um, you know, why would I come up with things like that, which, you know, you look at the history books and you begin to question and say, wow, really, you're talking about something that could potentially be real. So I'm going to go into some of that information. And I love to discuss this understanding of consciousness and the creation of our reality, how we create our reality. Because just like you asked me, that's exactly the question that I have. You know, if our mind is so powerful, maybe we just make up everything anyway. But if that's the case, that means that we have a lot of responsibility and a lot of power. So I hope with the book to be able to, you know, have that as a perspective out there for people that want to look into the phenomena or even the question of consciousness.
Exactly, and I think it's a very valid point that you know, there's a lot of people out there that just don't even know what mindfulness is. Really, they're going back to you do. Um, there's a lot of people out there that just don't simply know what mindfulness. That then they start to get into the more heavier topics that are may or may not be even researched, let alone experienced. And it's like, okay, now my mind is going to explode, and I can't seem to process everything that's either happening to me or the realities that are intermingled with each other. Um, of course, of course, of course, there's going to be plenty of people out there that experience different things and whatnot. But you know, I only I was only talking about manifestation, not necessarily because of consciousness, it's because we're still in that age where, yes, a lot of research needs to be done, but at the same time, there's a lot of people that just they're just like, no, 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 that's not real. That's not. What would you say to people like that?
Well, here's the thing. Obviously, we can't make anyone become interested in something that they're not. But the thing is, I tend to see that a lot of those people, they want to talk about science and they want to look at science and they only want to go by science. And the fact of the matter is that the science is there. It's there already. There is a lot of understanding of quantum physics and our universe and how it works and how consciousness plays a role in it. So what I think is that, you know, we're so engaged in our everyday lives that most of the time it's going to be the last thing that we even consider looking into. But the thing is that even now, there's a lot of responsibility in being a human, and the choices that we make, even the money that where we put our dollar, for example, it contributes to something. And so if you're not aware of where you're putting your dollar, you know, and you're contributing to mass massacres or something horrible that's happening down the line, I mean, are you going to just close your eye to that and just continue doing it? That's the thing. So I kind of use that example with the idea of informing yourself of things that are not necessarily in your immediate reality. Because even though your current moment might be, you know, where it is, um, we actually have a point in our life that we will begin to question who we are, where we come from. You know, at some point, you have some kind of existential questioning somewhere there. So if you take that road, you know, take the time to do the research because the science is beautiful. I mean, it's fascinating. Our understanding of quantum physics, our world, and you know, the thread of creation and our universe and time and space are all things that matter right now and that heavily influence our reality, but we're not aware of it. And I would say take the time to educate yourself or become curious of it, because um, what you're going to understand is that you're not helpless. And that's the number one thing. You have free will, and you're not going to understand that until you understand really how creation works, you know. So it, you know, it's something that's really important, and it's part of who we are. We're creative beings, whether we're creating families or we're creating you know, incredible inventions or something that's going to affect the world. It's our birthright. We're designed for that. So take the time, do the research.
Exactly. What else I was going to ask you? With the, I know that there's human hybridization. Is there any relation to the Human Genome Project?
So the Human Genome Project was just looking at the genes and that, but there is no direct connection to that. I feel like the Human Genome Project uh, ended at a certain point, but it's completely incomplete because I think they need to do another one. And that's what I've been really looking in the new research. I mean, we have all this incredible research in the Silicon Valley studying, trying to replicate how DNA writes and stores DNA, because that's the next step. The next step in our technology is to utilize DNA to store, just like we do a USB, because we're running out of space, right? We need more space for all this stuff that we're creating here. And so I think that that has been left where it is for a reason. And I think that it's time for it to be resurfaced. And I do hope that someone takes on that project. It's an incredible project to study and look again at the genome with new eyes, with all the new discoveries that have been made recently with holographic DNA, with the modification and the result. And this is, we're in the infancy stages, really, at least publicly. What we know, we're in the infancy stages of it, because the government has been, you know, working with a lot of this information for a long time. And the only reason why I allow myself to say such a thing is just simply because of my conscious participation in the programs that were done carried out through the military, and that I know a lot of women do, including you know, these special men and women that you named, like my labs, and these military people that are modified genetically to carry out certain roles in our government. So I think we're just at the beginning, Katie, and I hope that we revisit that. I hope they do another study, a thorough study that really looks at what our genes are holding and what they say about who we are.
Mm-hmm. And so outside of your support group, with what with the hybridmother.com website that you have, what type of projects are you doing with by yourself or with a team to educate the community about what human DNA origins and human hybridization is?
Yeah, so, well, aside from the book that I'm writing, I'm taking a lot of time focusing on that right now. But I am a participant of several conferences, and I do speak on this topic, and I share my what I research and collect from all the experiences that I have working with clients one-on-one, hypnotherapy. and also DNA reprogramming. So, really my research is just at the beginning. There's so much to be done. And right now with what's happening in our current events, a lot of this stuff has kind of come to stop. But one of the things is to reach out to hybrid mothers and hybrid fathers that are looking for answers and trying to understand themselves. And you don't have to look through my understanding of it. What I want and what's the most important thing about what I do is to empower you to find your truth, however that is, because your truth might be different, and you might be holding the puzzle piece to this, because each one of us has a piece of a puzzle to this, to understanding what's occurring, because it's a massive topic. So I am a part of those research programs, and also trying to work with clinical research on the hybridization program, trying to connect with gynecologists that have patients that have experienced or claim to experience this. I think that's something that someone really needs to focus on, and I hope to do that once we hopefully start to get some more movement, here where we're at. That's one of the things that I'm very passionate about. But my primary work is helping the human understand how to heal themselves and deprogram. So if you're experiencing emotional PTSD or experiences of interdimensional contact, or just trauma in your life and you feel blocked, because of the ability to see the multidimensional body, I work with clients to move those blockages out of their body and their mind, and I train people. I have a YouTube channel that focuses on advanced meditation techniques to help people access all that information and to train their intuition so that they can activate the same gifts that I have. Because even though it happened to me the way that it happened, everyone has the ability. And so everyone has the ability to do what I do. They just have to unlock those by activating the DNA or activating those aspects of themselves. So it can be taught, and that's what I focus on teaching on.
That is cool. I've always said that you can unlock any ability that you have within yourself. You just have to believe the fact that it's there. That's
Right.
and there's so many people out there that'll just say, "Man, you can't do that." Well, I can guarantee you can.
Yeah. If you believe it, you can do it. You can do it. And of course there's limitations to certain things, but the mind is so magnificently powerful, and we are the master of this little body. There is so much that we can do to heal, to change. I mean, it's out there. We understand how powerful the mind is in healing everything from cancer, to a simple illness, or cold. We have the ability of healing, and so we're fighting big companies, that are trying to keep us on little hamster wheels, being codependent on systems that are, making us codependent and making us believe that we don't have as much power as we do. But the fact of the matter, the human is incredibly powerful. And so the more we work to being more self-sustaining in every way, whether it's our health, our how we're contributing to society, we got to do it now. Now is the time for that. That's definitely what I think.
Exactly, through the collective consciousness of
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to ask an off question. Now, you mentioned earlier about the fact that you don't take any medications for pain and all of that kind of stuff. How do you overcome that for people out there who are looking at alternatives and trying to get off of pharmaceutical medications and whatnot? How do you go through that process?
Absolutely. And this is exactly what we were talking about, is understanding how the mind can help you in healing your body. Hypnosis is a very, very powerful technique to help people. It's a tool to help people manage pain. With hypnosis, I mean, since forever, they're using hypnosis to even do surgeries. On people, and doing all this medical procedures without actually cutting into the skin or into the body and doing these things. So the power of the mind is such that we can begin to support ourselves. And so my advice is, not to stop that. I'm not giving any medical advice, but support yourself, where you're strengthening and becoming acquainted with the power of your mind. And it starts by training your intuition so that you can begin to communicate with your body to understand what it needs. Because a lot of the times when we're hooked up on medications and other chemical substances that are changing, there's a big disconnect between our mind and our body and our intuition. And that carries out into our life, right? So it's kind of demonstrating in our relationships, in our career, and all kinds of things. So if we can begin to train ourselves in becoming more connected with that dialogue with the inner body and begin to understand our emotions, how they affect us, how they change, how we're creating things and doing things, that's the first step. So I would say take some time to meditate, okay? And meditation has sometimes become like this cringe word, which like people are so tired of hearing it. But in reality, the connection and the ability to create mindfulness inside allows you to become aware of all the things that are happening to you inside and outside. And if we don't come to a point where we're becoming aware, we just become a little, basically you're the chess in the game of chess instead of the chess player, right? It can be very easy to manipulate, to control, to change, to make you feel things that maybe you're not really even feeling, to become ill. How many times when you're watching TV do you have to hear the commercials for 20 million symptoms of 4 different, pharmaceuticals? I'm not surprised that anyone starts to feel those symptoms the next day or the following week after watching TV, maybe even just 2 hours a day or a week. Okay, so our mind is very, very susceptible also. So we got to become aware of where you're taking on programs. If you're in a constant state of survival mode, you're in fight or flight, your immune system goes down, and it breaks down a lot of different systems in the body that would normally operate in a healthier way if you would just lift your mood or accept the things that are happening. What causes suffering for us is mainly the resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
The resistance to accepting a lot of things. And so for healing, the majority of the illnesses and the ailments that we feel have an aspect that is emotional, a tremendous aspect that is emotional. The way that we store information in the body is through our nervous system, and we have router-like energy vortexes in the body that are intricately connected to the organs of the body. So you just need to look at where in your body you're having complications, and it'll tell you a lot about what you're storing within you. If you have heart problems, for example, you might be storing a lot of sorrow. You might not be able to let go of something that happened into your past. So many different things, but none of the things that I'm talking about are separate. They are all interconnected. So we have to become aware of that interconnection between mind, body, emotion, and how we choose to experience life. So the first step is to become aware of that, meditate, become aware of your sorrows, your pains that you haven't been able to process in life, and start slowly dissolving them. Because I guarantee that once you start working and supporting yourself emotionally, you're going to start feeling better. And at least it'll take you to a place where you can begin to start weaning off some of these medications and support yourself by strengthening your intuition and your mind in going even deeper into controlling and healing ailments and other things. It doesn't mean you're going to be, drug-free your entire life, or not use the pharmaceuticals your entire life. You might need them, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the body needs to be healthy from many aspects. Total health, it's holistic, right? It's more, it's everything. And so we have to become aware of the holistic aspect of ourselves as a human in order to create total health. And it's the food you're eating, the emotions, the things you choose to do, the things you choose to speak and think, and how you're interacting with your environment all play a role in your health. So it's just one of a lot of different things that have to be taken into consideration for healing.
Absolutely. And with that said, we are gonna wind down. With what have you got any upcoming events or anything you can let the listeners know, and where can we find you?
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, it was such an honor to be here and a pleasure to be here with you, Katie. And thank you to your listeners. You guys can find me at bayareameditation.com and also geraldineorozco.com. If you want to get a one-on-one DNA reprogramming with me, please check out my website. I'm happy to work with you. And I also, hybridmother.com for hybrid parents. You guys can visit my website for support group. It's an international hybrid parent support group, and also offer hypnosis and support for healing from the trauma of those experiences, also integration. You can also check out my YouTube channel where I have a lot of free tools that you can use to begin working and healing the aspects of yourself to get into total health. And if you guys have questions, I'm here, happy to serve. And thank you once again for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Geraldine, I thank you so much for being on my show. You are very, very welcome anytime. And do let me know when you do have some, do release your book, because
Yes.
bring you back on and you can plug it all you want.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm working on that, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that said, guys, you are listening to Soma Fusion Radio with your host Katie Kamara. We will be back next Wednesday at 7 p.m. That's my other show. We'll be back at 9 p.m. on next Wednesday. 7 p.m. I will be back on air with my other show, Goddesses and Devils, where we'll be having the Mystic Sisters on, and we'll be talking all sorts alternative and holistic taboo stuff that's not really talked about. We're going to be bringing it out, and of course, you know that show is all about social inclusion and equality. So do tune in at 7 p.m. on Saturday, and then again for Solar Fusion Radio at 9 p.m. next Wednesday. I will be posting up the promotion very, very soon. So everybody stay tuned for that up on social media. You can go to my website at www.soma-fusion.com and somafusionmedia.com. And for those who happen to see a break in the archive tonight, well, the broadcast tonight, don't worry, I will put it back up. I am recording everything, so if you had trouble, that's totally fine. You'll see it. But until then, everyone have a safe and lovely evening and a great week ahead. And I will see you either on Saturday, if you catch me on that broadcast, or on Wednesday. Until then, guys, have a great evening and we'll talk again.